Hi, this is Irving Steele, and we are here on Local Issues. Today we are very lucky and fortunate to have two guests who are doing incredible work in the community on an issue that affects many people in the community right now. We have Kathy and Anna from the Homeless Hospitality Center based out of New London. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I understand that there might be, of course, with COVID, lots of negative things that have happened for many people, but also something potentially really exciting and positive, something on Bank Street.
Yeah, so, I mean, as you said, COVID has been so unbelievably hard, but one of the, small bright spots is I think there's been an increasing investment in housing, recognizing that people need housing. And so we've been able to put together a number of different funding sources and purchase a new site on Bank Street. And one of the main things we've been doing there so far is rental assistance for people impacted by COVID, so people can stay in their homes rather than become homeless, which is called Unite CT. And we're hoping to build on that and to really get increasingly creative about how can we not wait until someone is literally homeless, although that's important too. We need to help people who do experience little homelessness, but let's try to help people keep their housing and afford their housing and not have it come to homelessness. So there's been a door opened here to try some new things, and I'm excited about seeing how we can make that work.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I know maybe bittersweet that you're expanding your operations. It shows that there's this immense need in the community, but you guys are stepping up to the plate and really helping these people.
Yeah, and I think all of us sort of understand this intuitively, but we don't stop to think about it, is how important it is to have a stable home. So many things in life get easier, whether it's pursuing your education, dealing with health problems, just employment. There's so many things that housing is a foundational piece of it. And so I think people are seeing that more. I think we're doing more to recognize also that affordability is a huge problem for a lot of people. And just to recognize, I think people are probably aware that I think there's 178 municipalities in the state of Connecticut. The city of New London is the 173rd lowest per capita income.
Wow.
So New London is a place, a wonderful place. I live in New London. I love New London. But there's many, many people here living on very limited income, and housing becomes their biggest single cost. And as housing prices go up, that's less money for food, less money to supply your children, less money for medical care, et cetera. So it's interwoven into a lot of different things.
And just as you said, it's that foundational element too that I always like to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that bottom rung is dwelling.
Right.
Without dwelling, like you said, how do you find a job? How do you be connected to the community? It's very difficult or impossible.
Right.
And so I feel like what you guys are doing there is providing that first step for people. And maybe we could find out a little bit more. I think there's about, 600 people that you're currently helping right now?
Well, it depends how you count it.
Okay.
Probably in our shelter over the course of the year is probably about 300 different people. I think a lot of people may be surprised that our region could have 300 people who've experienced literal homelessness. But then, we would add to that. We also have outreach. We do have a small number, fortunately, of people who are living in their cars or living outdoors or places not fit for human habitation. So we're reaching people through those outreach efforts. And then, as I said, a much expanded effort on people who are just recently housed and providing them with supports. And then probably, I think over the year, 2,000 different people who've come through getting rental assistance, COVID-related rental assistance. So you can count those numbers in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, well, regardless, it's a lot of people.
Right.
And I think it does go back to what you said, 173rd in Connecticut in terms of per capita income. Why do you think that is? for New London?
Gee, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of factors, and some of it I think is a little bit related that New London was sort of carved out as the city limits of New London to sort of concentrate, unfortunately, some of the areas that have been poorest. But again, I think New London's doing an awful lot of things that are really, really positive, and I think the city's still a wonderful place to live. But to me, it's I love New London, but it's also a laboratory to think about how can we have new policies, new approaches, new ways of helping people so that even though their income is limited, they can still thrive, can still have a quality of life that we would all want.
Yeah, because if you think about it, I know they just raised the minimum wage recently, but still, even at a minimum wage job, working 40 hours a week, what is that, something like $20,000 something a year?
Yep.
And with the affordability element, how much does an apartment cost in New London at the lowest cost?
Yeah, I mean, right now, when we're looking even for shared apartments, $1,000 a month is not unusual.
Minimum.
Yep. So if you think about that, if your goal was to spend not more than 30% or at most 50% of your income on housing, it doesn't buy you much.
Yeah, and then if you're making minimum wage one job, it's about 60%, more than double what you should be doing.
That's exactly right.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
And I understand that New London in this area has somewhat strong representation in Hartford, and then also you just mentioned down in DC. Have there been new innovative ways to support or help that you just mentioned?
Well, I think there's a lot of things happening. Most of the financial supports come from the federal level. So I think we have seen an increase in the number of housing vouchers. So a voucher is what most of the developed world actually makes available across the board to anyone. But basically, it's a voucher that pays the difference between your rent and 30% of your income. If we, in past years, got 5 a year, it would be a lot. I think this year we've had 45. It's still
45 vouchers.
45 vouchers. Still not a lot, but it's something. And as I said, this investment in rental assistance so that at least help people get out of the hole, that's been positive. But my fear is how sustainable is that going to be? And is that going to translate into some kind of longer term change in our housing policy in this country? And what I try to think about is that I just feel a huge pressure to show that it can work, because I don't control those levers, but at the very least, I don't want people to point and say, oh, look, here was this time where there was that investment available and nobody stepped up, or it didn't make a difference, or whatever. So it's a small thing, but I just want to do everything we can to show that this can work, that it can help people stay housed, that it can improve the stability of housing and the quality of housing.
Yeah, a mentor of mine always said you have to work with the system. So maybe it's not perfect as it is, but you're taking advantage of all these vouchers and as much as you can, it sounds like.
Well, at the very least, you have to work with the system. I mean, I think there's a strong role for advocacy. I think that, we need, in my view, to rethink how we feel about the safety net in the United States. And I won't start down that path. That's a very long path. Yeah. But I think at the very least, what's in front of us, let's do and let's use.
And I think it's pretty unique and opportune timing that Anna was able to join your team, I think not too recently, but not very long either. And with this need for fundraising and innovative ways to try this laboratory in New London, is a perfect time for you to join the team, right?
Yeah, I'm really grateful. It's exciting.
And what are you seeing in terms of corporations or different foundations reacting to the immense need we have in the area?
Well, I think, more than a lot of subject matters that I've studied for fundraising purposes, homelessness seems to pull at everyone's heartstrings, as much as it can. I mean, it seems to be across the board. Something that nobody wants to see their neighbors suffering in that way. Everybody has different ideas about how they can help. Some people perhaps are overwhelmed and don't think that they can really help at all. But it is an obvious and easy ask. We need your help. And what I think is also really special that I'm learning is that we're not just raising money to keep the heat on in a shelter building for, right now it's 26 adults. We slowly were able to grow to bridge some other gaps that were happening. Once they're at our shelter, that doesn't mean that they're in a good position. They're still in crisis, major crisis, so they're not in a great position to be helping themselves up. So we have, mostly, I would say what we have in programming is relationships with people who can help. So we'll undertake the bureaucratic nightmares of various rental assistance and all of those kinds of things, because we know that our friends can't do that at that time, just like there are times when I can't handle those things myself and I need to call for help. We have developed this immense family of staff who will help people through every step of the way. So it starts with coming into the shelter and getting an intake and getting to know somebody who can figure out the best ways to help. Sometimes that's diversion. It means we're able to say, in fact, here's a different resource you might want to consider. And sometimes it's rapid rehousing, which is the most impressive. I think the last statistic I read was 200 people per year we were able to quickly find new housing for.
And I thought that was unique from what I read about the organization on the webpage. Is the goal isn't to have them come and stay for as long as possible. Quickly kind of support them to the next step. I guess that's rapid rehousing as part of that.
Yeah, because what they would do is they would leave the shelter, and some might have the resilience at that moment to get their leg up, but most don't. Just like we all may not have those areas in our lives where we don't have that resilience. So it's really special.
And I think resources too. I think again, those of us that have the luxury of being able to come up with $100 if we need it. I think if you really stop and think about, in the state of Connecticut, if you don't have work, there is no, there's no welfare for adults in Connecticut. So we really have people who are literally destitute, right? They don't have money to buy a pack of cigarettes. And so to me, the idea that, well, if you could replace your IDs, if you had the $25 to get that birth certificate, well, then you could, what's that, but for a nail, the war was lost kind of analogy. And I just think that is such a scandal, right? That because the person has nothing, and a lot of places, and I admire a lot of work that they do, but it's very siloed. We'll do these things for you, but if you need $25 for a birth certificate, or you can get a job but you need a pair of pants that are, meet the employer's guidelines, no, we can't help you with that. And so one of the things that's just very important for me is to think about people as a whole and think about what's their goal and how do we fill in, to the extent that we can, those gaps so that they can get to their goal. And I just want to say one other thing about what Anna does so beautifully, really, is volunteers. And I can't tell you, how many people, and maybe they're just saying this because they know the executive director of the Homeless Hospitality Center, who say that volunteering has just changed their perspective. I mean, just actually being there, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, Anna, just connecting with people. These are your neighbors. I don't know, Anna, if you wanted to say anything more about just the experience that not everybody, but some people have with that.
Well, it's amazing to me the different types of people that we have volunteer, and we have everybody from a rabbi who comes once a week to a minister who comes once a week, but also people who are doing community service, and college students and people like that. Most recently, I think you met with her on Saturday. You might not have even realized she was there, but she was. We have somebody who was doing community service, so was literally counting down the number of hours before She didn't have to be there anymore, and now is over and is staying on to continue to be helpful of her own accord. So to me, it just seemed like the way that community service actually works well. It changed her whole idea about how housing works, and how helping people really works, and what she wants to do with her spare time. And she wants to continue and stay and help people get housed. And so there
exactly. And to Kathy's point too, is you're there and you really connect with these people who are getting the assistance. They're members of the community. They have hearts just like we do. They bleed just the same color that we bleed. And I think that human-to-human connection changes everything.
The definition of hospitality for us. That's why it's in the name.
Yeah. And just off camera before we started, I told you I came back at the start of the pandemic from overseas, and one of the things I went and did was to go get a real estate license, thinking that real estate is such an important element of this whole homelessness and affordable housing crisis that I feel like we have in this part of the state. And I'm curious kind of what new laboratory ideas or kind of real estate developments that we could maybe envision for this region, if you have any ideas on that.
You could do a whole program on that. I think many people have said this is nothing new, is that unfortunately I think Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the country. And that's, a lot of it is because of zoning, right? So, I think I understand why, people cling so tightly to this 1 acre, 1 house, 1 acre, 1 lot, 1 family. But honestly, if we don't rethink how we view housing and start to find ways to have multifamily housing, to have auxiliary dwelling units. There's even just something like sometimes called a grandparent pad or something. I think we're going to have a very hard time. And anybody that's watched the newspaper, I think you've seen people even hear affordable housing. This isn't housing for people experiencing homelessness. This is affordable housing, so teachers and store clerks. And people go nuts, I think we have to find a way where we can, allay people's fears. And obviously, I understand that people are worried, this has changed. But if we don't do something about how we think about housing, I think it's going to be very, very hard to have enough affordable housing to meet the need. I think it's going to be a super serious crisis in the time ahead if we don't rethink this.
Definitely, and just having that open mind, kind of think outside the box. One of our previous guests was the Hope Partnership.
Sure.
And just as you said, affordable housing, they get so much pushback saying, hey, we don't want these people in our neighborhood, these things. But one thing that they mentioned, we don't need to go into it too much, but they are able to redevelop some of these places that are just empty, crumbling, falling apart. So it actually does increase the real estate value of the place around them. And then instead of people living in motel rooms week to week, people are moving into places where they actually pay taxes to the municipality, to the state, and be contributing members to society there.
Yep.
So it does take that kind of creative mindset.
Well, and I think it also takes a sense of community, and it takes, I don't want to get on my religious high horse, but I think it takes feeling that we have responsibilities to each other. And it may be a little more traffic on my street because there's, 4 houses rather than 1. And we just have to get, and we're so far from this now, a sense of being responsible with and to each other. And I don't know, we seem to be going in the wrong direction on that one. But I just think, again, that's the mindset that if we can encourage that, and some of this is just getting to know people. I really believe that, our stereotypes of poor people or people experiencing homelessness or whatever are so much worse than when we really meet people experiencing homelessness or struggling with their rent. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to start thinking more as a community and less as just individual just individuals.
Yeah, what's that one quote? Love the neighbor, just love each other as much as possible. We need, especially now with COVID and these wars going on internationally, I feel like we really do need to just love one another as much as possible.
Right. But if you don't love one another, at least let not somebody live next to you. You can build up to loving them.
Yeah, one step at a time to get there. Yeah.
It's a ladder, Work your way up that ladder.
Yeah. And to some of what Anna was saying too, and both of you, was when you're in this kind of crisis situation, it's hard to maybe take care of the most easy tasks that usually you could take care of. But in crisis, you need those additional hands of support. And I think a big part of that too is around employment. And I'm really curious kind of what your feelings are for employment locally here, how you help them, where there's opportunities, and where companies can maybe support.
Well, that's one of the other things, and Anna's very familiar with this too, is that we have an employment specialist who's really quite a character, very, very good at what she does. And I do think right now there are jobs available. And so I think she's probably worked with 100 people in the last year, helping them connect, helping them get their resumes together. And so, I think there's a huge, huge opportunity there. And then how do people stay stable in their employment? And that's also, getting a job is one thing, but as Catherine, is the employment person's name, getting a job is one thing, keeping it is the second challenge. And I think that's where I'm hoping that we can wrap some services around or supports around what Catherine's doing. Because again, if your housing's unstable, if your mental health issues are not being addressed, if you have no transportation, transportation is an unbelievable problem. So a lot of people, their first job will be an overnight job. The buses stop at 8 o'clock. So if you have to get to work at 11, I remember a couple people would ride their bicycles to Norwich. I think the share a ride thing is really a huge innovation in New London. But if you happen to get a job outside it's very, very hard to get anywhere, and you can't afford a car, and you don't have a license. So
insurance,
that's not
all
an
these
option.
extra costs, yeah. And the lack of public transportation makes that nearly impossible.
Right.
Think about biking back and forth to Norwich in the middle of the night. That's dangerous.
A lot of what people don't realize that the Homeless Hospitality Center does is anybody who comes into the shelter, first of all, they're not all unemployed. There are people who are employed, but have, for whatever other reasons, have lost all of their financial resources to keep themselves housed. But we are immediately offering them the ability to participate in an employment training program if they want it, and even more so, we'll try to really encourage it if we can. So we have seen some really great successes. You can see those on our website. We have some of the latest ones that were really touching to me. Robert and Earl, and people who really took a very short time to get back on their feet, actually. And you'll see them at we might see them at the Walk to End Homelessness that's coming up. But what's been really impressive to me is our former guests are now our biggest fans. And they weren't while necessarily while they were going through such a tough time. But now they are really just, their lives have been turned around because of just sometimes very simple, not even particularly expensive help, other than paying for staff and basic operations.
And one thing that I'm always reminded by is how close I feel like almost all of us are to the actual state of homelessness. That just the other month, a couple of months ago, a family friend of ours, we thought was doing great, had this job, all these different things, but went through some personal issues, and just like that, was left without a space to stay. And if you don't have a friend or a cousin or a relative who can help you, you're out, you need help. And so we were lucky enough we had a room that he could stay at for a couple months just to kind of get back on his feet and find another job. But it's hard, and it's just one step away for so many of us. We don't realize that, I think, in a community.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning the Walk to End Homelessness. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that. I think that's one of your big events each year.
Yep, we're about to have it. And I've never been, I was at one, but I've never planned it. So Kathy knows more about the ins and outs of it. But it's just, this year it's April 24th at 1 o'clock, starting at Parade Plaza. And it's the 15th annual Walk to End Homelessness. So it's about just coming together as a group, I think, and having some collective energy towards solving this problem and advocating against it, and then also raising money for the Homeless Hospitality Center to continue to do what we do. And it's available. People can register now at nlhhc.org or by calling us. But we hope to see a big crowd come out now, because we're not, the last 2 years it took a hit because of COVID.
I'm sure.
And now we want to get back.
And I think that's a great way to also form that stronger connection between people in the community, to see both the impact, the positive impact you guys are doing in the community, but then also the people that are getting impacted by this. That if you've never slept in your car for days or weeks, you don't realize how tired you are when you wake up, how sore your legs are. And I've experienced that, and that's hard, even if it's just for a few days. And I can't imagine if that's your only choice. It's unbelievable how important the work is that you guys are doing. And Anna, you mentioned a little bit about COVID. Has there been other impact that you guys have faced from that? Or Kathy?
Well,
maybe?
if you want to think about a place where COVID's going to spread, congregate shelter.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very pleased to say that for most of the pandemic, we had only a couple positives. So we really worked hard. We had fewer beds. We were cleaning like mad. We were, working really hard at it. Then when the Omicron variant in January, when that spike happened, I think at our peak we had 50 people in isolation.
Wow.
So 50 COVID positive people in one night.
Unbelievable.
So, again, I just can't say how hard a lot of our staff worked. The state provided hotel rooms so that we could let people isolate, but just getting people back and forth and getting everybody food and, dealing with everybody's complaints and the people on methadone who had to get to their methadone appointments. But I think we served people well and tried to keep people as safe as we possibly could.
Yeah, I'm sure. And we just have about a minute left, but one thing I wanted to highlight before turning over to you guys is just the social justice element of all the great work you guys are doing. Something like 13% of the population is identified as African American. However, that's about 40% of the homelessness in our country. So I think it's really important to point that out.
Yes.
And if people watching this, if they want to find out more about your organization, if they want to volunteer, donate money, where can they find out more about any of that?
You can start with the nlhhc.org, or you can call me at 860-439-1573. Ask for me or for Kathy.
No, don't ask for me.
She's too busy.
Ask for her.
We will, and we would love to entertain ideas for volunteering, even besides just our core needs. We have lots of innovative ways for people to help, and money being one of the biggest. We need it. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you.